Hello and welcome to a brand new show on the talkSPORT Cricket YouTube channel and also via the talkSPORT podcast feed. Following on India, myself and Jarrod Kimber, we're going to be joined by a selection of top guests every week focusing on Indian cricket. India cricket is exclusively live on talkSPORT. We have the rights to all of India's home series between now and 2028. And we've got some really exciting news for you coming up in the next couple of weeks about a couple of those series. But for now, sit back and enjoy. We're going to be joined by Harsha Bhogle, the legendary broadcaster, as well as Mohammed Isam from Cricinfo, the Bangladesh correspondent, looking ahead to the Bangladesh series and also ahead to the rest of the home summer in India, all the way up to the Border-Gavaskar in Australia. Thanks so much for joining us here on Following on India with myself, Jon Norman, and also Jarrod Kimber. Harsha, thanks so much for joining us. We're on the eve of the home summer. It's always an exciting time to be. It's always a great place to be. Myself and Jarrod are looking ahead to the next 5 Test matches: 2 against Bangladesh, 3 against New Zealand, before, of course, India head off to Australia. And we're just asking ourselves a question: what is it that this India team really want to get out of this 5 Test matches? Who better to ask, really, from your perspective? What is it that what answers do you think that India are looking for going into a series against Bangladesh and New Zealand, 2 Test teams that most people would expect them to win?
Yes, for a start, try and win all 5, because that almost guarantees them a place in the World Test Championship final. As of now, the lead is very comfortable, but you win the home season, then you're guaranteeing yourself a place in that World Test Championship final. They know Australia is going to be a difficult tour. There's a couple of seasons left in that great quartet of fast bowlers, quartet of bowlers in Australia, but they'll be fresh. There's a lot of talk coming from Australia. There's a temptation, at least amongst us, to think about Australia and think about the home season as almost the curtain raiser to the real series, which is something I think they need to avoid. Hearing that Chennai is going to be a fast, bouncy pitch and India might actually play 3 quicks and only 2 spinners. Because the last time India played Bangladesh, I think the spinners got 5 wickets in the whole series or something like that. So that'll be interesting. But yeah, I think it's a phenomenal 11 months in prospect for Rohit Sharma as captain too. If he can win everything, he seals his legacy.
Harsha, it's really interesting watching India be so dominant at home and people not really talk it up all that much. So if you go back to when Australia was dominant at home, it was like everyone talked about it. But the difference being is Australia were dominant at home, they were great away from home, and they won a bunch of trophies. And if you look at South Africa, that period where they didn't lose a lot, but kept losing trophies, people never gave them the credit. Now they've won the World Cup. It feels like people have now started to talk up that home record again and the dominance. It really is one of the more dominant home performances we've ever seen from a Test team in history, right? The last, 10 or so years.
Going back to the England tour of India in 2012.
Yeah.
It's a nice little point to start off. Joe Root making his debut in that series in 2012, to see the kind of player he's gone on to become. But since 2012, it's been an extraordinary run, except in the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, India haven't lost a series, but they've lost the odd Test match. For 10 years, from 2012 onwards, India were almost impossible to beat at home. But thereafter, I think England won a Test match in Hyderabad, Australia won a Test match. Whenever India have prepared absolute turners, they've actually been a little vulnerable, because legend has it that Indians are the best players of spin. The numbers are suggesting that India are actually better against quicker bowling than against spin in recent times. So given that, say Bangladesh, for example, 3 very good finger spinners, I don't think you'll get a turner. Even against England last time, I think there might have been the odd game, but otherwise the tracks were pretty good. So it gets talked about a fair bit in India, but maybe not as much overseas. South Africa is the interesting one, because I'm convinced that just as we talk about the big 3, India, England, Australia, those are also the big 3 of the media world. And South Africa is not part of the big media world, so their performances don't get talked about as much. I mean, Hashim Amla is a legend. How often do we talk about Hashim Amla as one of the greats?
That's a good point. Talking about the big 3, there was a story this week, I'm sure you saw, in India, the crowds at some of the test matches here in England, there weren't anything to write home about for a variety of reasons on day 4. And then they've crunched the numbers essentially. There was an article by Tim Wigmore in the Telegraph saying that, essentially showing that outside the big 3, test match attendances are falling off, or certainly diminishing. What's the situation in India? Is that a similar kind of situation? It's such a different geography and place. Very often, these states are very, they're so relieved to have international cricket. So it's not quite the same in England, where it's kind of the same test grounds every single year. But do you find the appetite to attend test cricket is diminishing outside of the arrival of teams like England and Australia, or is it kind of the same no matter who's playing or, wherever they are in the country?
England is the worrisome one. England is and has been for a long time the genuine home of test match cricket, because you always get crowds in England. If the crowds are diminishing in England, then that's an issue. I did 2 test matches last year, Australia versus Pakistan in Australia, and the crowds there were okay. There weren't much to write home about. In India, we are a viewership country rather than a spectator country. By how many people actually watch it on television rather than how many people actually come to the ground. There will be a few. Chennai is a good place. Mumbai is a good place. Bangalore is a good place. So these are places where you'll get decent crowds. But if we get a full house, I doubt very much we'll get a full house.
What do you think this series means now? So traditionally, playing Bangladesh is not like the biggest deal in the world. And, Bangladesh turned out to Pakistan and surprised themselves. They've kind of assembled this incredible side. Indian fans, I've done a few podcasts, with some Indian publications recently, and Indian fans are still very skeptical of Bangladesh because no one thinks Pakistan's very good at the moment, which is an accurate description of Pakistan's test cricket. But you look at Bangladesh, and this is maybe the first time where Bangladesh are turning up with a fully formed test team. They've got 5 bowlers that they can go with. They can go with, out and out quick bowlers. They can play 3 or 4 spinners if they want to, and high quality spinners, all rounders. Their batting is coming up as well. It's probably the first time that Bangladesh has ever turned up in India, and we've thought, well, this is a team that should be fighting for a match. That doesn't mean they're going to beat India necessarily, but they're on a much higher level. If they do have a really good series, and stealing a test match may be the height of that, does that sort of change your relationship between India and Bangladesh going forward?
Relationship, we must hasten to add, because the political relationship, as you know, is under some strain at the moment because of events in Bangladesh. Hopefully that won't carry over into the test series. What I'd like to see from Bangladesh is a belief, because I genuinely believe they have a good team, but do they think they have a team that's good enough to challenge? I saw them play 2 test matches in India 3 or 4 years ago, and I don't think they believed they were there to compete. So if they believe they can, Mehdi Hasan Miraj has become a really good player. Liton Das is their best white ball player, becoming a very good red ball player too. Mushfiq and Shakib they're coming to the end, but it's not very apparent that they're coming to the end. If they can get something from the openers, I think this will be the best test match team I've seen from Bangladesh for a long time. Also largely because they've got a little bit of pace. Did you see Nahid Rana bowl? He only started playing 5 years ago. It'll be interesting to see if he can come in and make the batters hop, because there's something about genuine pace. I was excited about Taskin Ahmed, but he never became the player that we thought he would. Injuries, you talked about Pakistan. Pakistan's bowlers seem to carry injuries in their kit bag. They're forever getting injured because they're being overbowled. I feel sad for the fast bowlers in Pakistan, but genuinely, and it's not just Nahid Rana, there's Taskin, there's Hassan Mahmood, there's a few there, but real good quality spin. That's why I think India will go in with fast, bouncy, seaming tracks. In Chennai, from what I've been reading, I've not yet gone there. In Chennai, they've tried to replicate the Mumbai kind of wicket in Chennai. So if there's seam, bounce, pace with Bumrah, Siraj, Akashdeep has looked very good in the Duleep Trophy, then India might have a big advantage.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because generally when you play Bangladesh, you put out those sorts of wickets, but they've been so good on wickets that have had lateral movement and a little bit of pace. So they're not the same Bangladesh that they used to be. My final question is just on KL Rahul. India have moved on from Ishant Sharma and then Ajinkya Rahane being the whipping boys. KL Rahul is in that role at the moment. Anyone who understands cricket knows why India have him in the setup, because he's a player who can bat any position from 1 to 6, and he could be your backup wicketkeeper. And the assumption is he'll be very good in Australia or England. If he has a bad series, though, is that it? Do they move on from KL Rahul?
Because it wasn't that long ago that he went to South Africa and played a stunning innings in South Africa. It was, Sunil Gavaskar said anybody would have been proud to have played that innings. And then he only played 1 test match after that against England. He didn't play the next, remaining 4 test matches. I genuinely believe, I've been a KL Rahul fan for a very long time. I genuinely believe he can play the VVS Lakshman role in Indian cricket, batting down at 5, maybe even 6. If you want a left-hander, Rishabh Pant goes up. Maybe KL Rahul bats 6, or maybe he bats at 5. If you lose a couple of early wickets, he's very good. He goes in early at number 5. I actually think this could be a takeoff point after all these years for KL Rahul.
Lastly, Harsha, before we let you go, what will Gautam Gambhir bring to this India side? What will India look like under Gautam Gambhir that was any different than how they looked under Rahul Dravid and Ravi Shastri?
Rahul Dravid, very different from Ravi Shastri. Temperamentally, in terms of his approach, much more people's person. I think Ravi and Virat made a really good combination. Slightly similar characters, but I think Rohit wanted Rahul to continue for a little bit longer. But I think Gautam Gambhir is a slightly misunderstood person because of his body language, because he seems abrasive, because he seems to want to get into a fight all the time. But his record in India as a leader is actually very good. And the people who've played under Gautam Gambhir really look up to him. So there's a people's person behind Gautam Gambhir as well, which is something that will be tested. Not as much not as much in India. I think when it comes to 5 in Australia and 5 in England, that is when he will be really tested. Also, don't forget, he's come in as a coach at a time when Rohit Sharma is 37 going on 38. Ravichandran Ashwin turns 38 today. Virat Kohli is on the other side of 35. As much a father of 2 as a test match batter, dare I say, without ever questioning his commitment. But there's a lot of father and family person in him increasingly. So he's presiding over a team that's not getting younger. So it'll be a test for him.
Brilliant stuff. Harsha, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thanks.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.